Hello, everyone, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. And I do also now have a Patreon page where you can get early access to my podcast episodes, the link to which I will put down in the show notes. So it's been a minute since I've done an episode like this because it's been a minute since I've seen a piece that really deserves this treatment. And this one so does. And I wanted to do this not just because of this piece, egregious as it is, but also because this is an idea that I've been seeing circulate a little too much for my particular comfort. And that is this idea that somehow the First Amendment, free speech, has just all gone way too damn far off the rails. And now we need some kind of either laws or some kind of regulations to be put in place to govern, quote unquote, hate speech. Which, if you're new here and you've not been following me for a while, I am a free speech absolutist. I do not support any kind of ban on any kind of speech whatsoever. That's a hard no from me. It's something I do take a very harsh stance on. So, like I said, this kind of talk, and again, I'm starting to see it a lot more, really makes me uncomfortable because it's one of those where I wonder if the people making these arguments have really thought them through all the way to the logical end, not even like an absurdist end, but just the logical end of what it would look like if the government made laws, which, first of all, the First Amendment prohibits that, so that's a no-go right there. But even if tech companies, if social media companies started instituting rules on their platforms governing what can and cannot be said, and for what it's worth, and I'll discuss this not so much in this episode, but probably in the next episode when I do my weekly roundup. Both Twitter and Facebook have instituted diametrically opposed policies lately to political speech as to how they will be handling it as far as political ads going forward. Facebook has decided that it's pretty much a free-for-all. They're not going to regulate anything. They're not going to try to parse whether a political ad is real or false or anything like that. And Twitter has actually gone in the opposite direction and basically said, you know what? Screw it. We're not allowing any more political ads whatsoever. So, like I said, that's going to be a discussion probably for the next episode. But I do think that that kind of touches on what actually happens when tech companies do start instituting rules on what can and cannot be said on their platform and how it really shakes out in practice versus how, in theory, people seem to think it's going to work. So, obviously, you've seen the title of this, and if you've spent any time on social media, you know this piece because everybody has ripped it on social media, rightfully so, because this is a ridiculous piece, and it is titled "Why America Needs a Hate Speech Law" by Richard Stengel, who used to be an editor of Time magazine. First of all, okay, anybody who is actually an editor of any kind of publication in the United States should know better than to even attempt to make this argument. Like, dude, you should know better. But here we are in the opinion section of the Washington Post trying to make an argument about how we need a hate speech law to govern the things that are said that are so bad and so nasty, and we have to do something about it, which obviously you already know. You already know how I feel about that, but let's go ahead and get into the piece because this thing is just, this is ridiculous. Like, I get why Washington Post published it because, I mean, it's the opinion section. People are supposed to be able to voice their opinions, which, again, is another reason why we don't need a hate speech law, because then all of a sudden you start having to police opinion pieces like this, Richard. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the piece. When I was a journalist, I loved Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s assertion that the Constitution and the First Amendment are not just about protecting free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. Okay, first of all, when I was a journalist, I'm pretty sure every journalist is down with the First Amendment, because that's the thing in the United States that allows every journalist and every opinion writer or opinion broadcaster, like yours truly, and like a lot of you, who either write or have your own podcast or have your own Twitter accounts or express yourselves in any which way you choose to do so. Yeah, we tend to kind of like the First Amendment and kind of like the idea that it protects us, not only our speech, but other people's speech. Even if that's speech that you don't particularly care for, guess what? They get to say whatever they want to say too, the same way you do. When I was a journalist, come the fuck on. Anyway, moving on. But as a government official traveling around the world championing the virtues of free speech, I came to see how our First Amendment standard is an outlier. Even the most sophisticated Arab diplomats that I dealt with did not understand why the First Amendment allows someone to burn a Quran. Why, they asked me, would you even want to protect that? Oh my God. Okay, first of all, I don't give a rip what other countries do. We, as far as speech is concerned, as far as the First Amendment is concerned, as far as our culture of free speech is concerned, we do not need to get on other countries' levels. Other countries need to get on our level. I don't give a shit what other countries do. That's them. And a lot of other countries have some pretty horrific laws when it comes to free speech. Look at what's going on in England. They're trying to actually shut down sections of the internet because somebody made a meme or somebody said a thing that somebody didn't like. And it's just no, I don't care. I don't care what other countries do. So, that. And then, now, you want to sit here and navel gaze over the idea that some Arab diplomat asked you, why the hell would the United States want to protect somebody from burning the Quran? Dude, do you need this explained? I'll explain it. We protect people being able to burn the Quran the same way we protect people being able to burn the Bible, or the Talmud, or the Bhagavad Gita, or Democracy in Chains, or any other book that you want to burn. And I'm not really a fan of book burning. I think it's kind of dumb. But if that is the way you choose to express your opinion about a book, yes, you get to do that in the United States. We support people's right to express their opinions in whatever way that they want, provided that you're not hurting somebody else in the process. And when I say hurting somebody, I mean physically hurting someone. You don't get to punch someone because they said something you didn't like. But if you want to burn a book, or you want to burn a flag, or you want to burn somebody in effigy, whatever it is that you want to do, yes, the First Amendment gives you that right, and our culture gives you that right. And yes, that is something to be defended, not something to navel gaze about and be like, oh, well, that's a good point. Why would we want to do that? Like, it's self-evident. Because we do. Because everybody gets to do that. I'm just like, oh my God. But let's keep going because it gets worse. It's a fair question. Yes, the First Amendment protects the thought that we hate, but it should not protect hateful speech that can cause violence by one group against another. In an age when everyone has a megaphone, that seems like a design flaw. Okay, first off, you can get all the way the fuck out of here with that. Second of all, let me give you a way of thinking about this going forward, not just for the rest of this episode, but whenever somebody wants to bring up the idea of hate speech. And this is going to kind of be a twist on the idea that all speech is free speech. All speech is hate speech. Because no matter what you can say the most benign thing possible, and somebody is going to view that as hateful. I mean, if you spend any time on Twitter, you can say just the most basic thing, and somebody's going to jump down your throat about it. Somebody's going to find it hateful. Somebody's going to say, oh, it's sexist, or it's ableist, or it's this, it's that, it's the other. So all speech is hate speech. So if you want to start going down the slope of trying to figure out, oh, well, we need to protect or not protect the hateful speech, well, okay. That's going to be everybody. That's going to be everything. I mean, even if you posted up a picture of a basket of kittens, somebody's going to find a reason to find that hateful. So like I said, going forward, think about it in that particular framing that all speech is hate speech. It is important to remember that our First Amendment doesn't just protect the good guys. Our foremost liberty also protects any bad actors who hide behind it to weaken our society. In the weeks leading up to the 2016 election, Russia's Internet Research Agency planted false stories hoping they would go viral. They did. Russian agents assumed fake identities, promulgated false narratives, and spread lies on Twitter and Facebook, all protected by the First Amendment. Oh my God. Of course we have to bring up Russia because I'm so damn tired of this argument, people. Like, I cannot begin to express to you how many times the idea that Russian memes disrupted the 2016 election has been debunked. That I can't believe we are at the end of 2019 and we are still having the same fucking discussion. Like, are you kidding me? And yes, and it's not even that the First Amendment protected that. It is that those platforms decided, yes, those people can post on that platform. It has nothing to do with the First Amendment, first off. And that's another thing that really annoys me when people start to make these kind of arguments. And this is something that I am particularly particular about. And that is separating First Amendment arguments from free speech arguments. First Amendment arguments deal with Congress making laws regarding speech. That's what the First Amendment covers. And that's it. It solely deals with Congress making laws that infringe upon speech or religion or assembly or the press. That's what the First Amendment deals with. Free speech deals with everything else. So this would be a free speech argument, to which I would say, I mean, if that's what a platform wants to let on their platform, sure, okay. If they want to take somebody's money to run some dumbass ad, that's their business. Or not take the money to run the dumbass ad. That's their business too. But just this whole... I'm so done with the whole Russiagate fake news thing that just... And there's a deeper argument that I have to make about that that's kind of beyond the scope of what I want to talk about today, and maybe I'll pick that up again at a later date, but let's go ahead and get back to the piece. The Russians understood that our free speech and its reflex towards balance and fairness would enable Moscow to slip its destructive ideas into our media ecosystem. When Putin said back in 2014 that there were no Russian troops in Crimea, an outright lie, he knew our media would report it, and they did. Well, of course they fucking reported it. It's what he said. They're not saying that it wasn't a lie. But I mean, you can't not report what Putin says about Crimea. Like, what the hell kind of argument is that? The press kind of has to report on what well, for lack of a better term here, what a world leader has to say about a current ongoing situation, which it was in 2014. And yes, there were Russian troops in Crimea. We all know that. We knew that then. Anybody with half a brain knew that then. But to slam the media for reporting it, like, well, that's their job. Like, that's what they're supposed to do. And like I said, this piece is horrible, people. It is horrible. And the whole idea that, again, that 2016 happened because the Russians, I'm like, that's just such a reduction of the 2016 election, which at this point, I've discussed this a whole bunch of times. There is no one reason why 2016 happened. It's really complicated. A lot of things came together at one time to create this singularity that ended up with Donald Trump being president. So this idea that anybody can point to one thing and say, yep, that is the thing that made 2016 happen, is bullshit. It's just, it's complete bullshit. And it's such a dumb way of looking at what happened in 2016. And I'd hoped by this point there would be enough people who would really have sat down to think about that topic to make sure that maybe that sequence of events doesn't happen again. But there hasn't been. And so this sequence of events is going to happen again next year. And I'm not looking forward to it. But anyway, moving on. That's partly because the intellectual underpinnings of the First Amendment were engineered for a simpler era. The amendment rests on the notion that the truth will win out in what Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas called the marketplace of ideas. This marketplace model has a long history going back to 17th century English intellectual John Milton, but in all that time, no one ever quite explained how good ideas drive out bad ones, how truth triumphs over falsehoods. Okay. I would never put myself on par with John Milton. I'm not quite that smart. But the idea that it is not self-evident over, the course of this whole country's existence, even if you want to narrow it down to over, say, the past 100 years, the idea that it is not self-evident that Milton's idea that good ideas drive out bad. What the fuck? How do you think we got here? How do you think we've made any kind of progress as a society? It's that. It's people exercising their First Amendment rights and their free speech rights to have debates that have driven out bad ideas like the idea of slavery, or the idea that some races are inferior to other races, or that women are inferior to men, or that gay people are inferior to straight people. How do you think we got here? Dude, like what? Did just poof? Like magic? No. And it's not from passing laws either, because politics is downstream of culture. And so when laws do finally get passed, as wonderful it is to codify certain things, it is because somebody decided that the time has come. That society has decided the time has come for this particular thing to become law. Like, this idea that nobody's ever proven that good ideas drive out bad is absolutely absurd. I don't know where people come up with this shit. I really don't some days. But anyway, Milton, an early opponent of censorship, said truth would prevail in a free and open encounter. A century later, the framers believed that this marketplace was necessary for people to make informed choices in a democracy. Somehow, magically, truth would emerge. The presumption has always been that the marketplace would offer a level playing field, but in the age of social media, that landscape is neither level nor fair. I don't understand this argument at all. I really don't. I have made the argument several times that social media, in that Twitter, Facebook, whatever you use, the Gab, TikTok, whatever the kids use nowadays, I don't even know, is the most egalitarian form of communication you could possibly have, because you are totally free to engage or not engage with whoever it is you wish. You are under no obligation. You are under no restrictions. You can do whatever you wish as far as who you want to talk to. It doesn't get much more level or fair than that. There's no coercion whatsoever. You don't have to talk to anybody, or you can talk to whoever you want to talk to. You can promulgate whatever ideas you want. You can reject whatever ideas you want. You can follow people. You can block people. You can mute people. You can make it to where you never see somebody's name in your feed ever again. How much more level and fair do you want this to be? I don't get it. And as far as what ideas get promoted, well, that's on the people who participate on the platform. That's what you retweet. That's what you like. That's what you share. That's what you give the thumbs up to. That's on you. Again, like it's all in your hands. Nobody's forcing you to do anything. Your experience on social media is completely up to you. Which is why I get very annoyed when people start to try to make noises about how these companies need to do this, that, or the other to enhance the user experience. Enhance your own damn experience, people. Use the tools they've already given you. Stop bothering Jack and Zuck and all of them, and just police your own shit. But moving on. On the internet, truth is not optimized. On the web, it's not enough to battle falsehood with truth. The truth doesn't always win. In the age of social media, the marketplace model doesn't work. A 2016 Stanford study shows that 82% of middle schoolers couldn't distinguish between an ad labeled sponsored content and an actual news story. Only a quarter of high school students could tell the difference between an actual verified news site and one from a deceptive account designed to look like a real one. To that, I say, well, 82% of middle schoolers need to go back to reading comprehension class to learn that sponsored content, when it is labeled, which, by the way, I am so old and I've been on the internet so long, I remember the days before the FTC started making people label ads as such. It was a lot different back then. Now you have to label your sponsored content as sponsored content. So if something says sponsored content, it's an ad. I'm sorry, do 82% of middle schoolers not know how to read? Or do they not comprehend that something that's labeled sponsored content is an ad? And if so, what am I supposed to do about that? What is anybody supposed to do about that? What is a platform supposed to do about that? What's the government supposed to do about that? Because the FTC has already addressed it. Like, there's already a law in place that says that if you are promoting sponsored content, you have to label it as such. And I even remember, because I remember this was a big thing when it hit YouTube, when the FTC put this regulation into place, that people who were doing sponsored content had to label it as such. And it became a big to-do. And yeah, it was just a big whole thing. Anyway, there's already a law in place that governs that. If people can't read, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. Now, as far as a quarter of high schoolers being able to tell the difference between an actual verified account and a deceptive one, is that not the purpose of verification of social media accounts? Isn't that the point of the blue check? Isn't that the point of, I don't know what the analogous thing would be on Facebook, but is that not the point of a verified account, is that the platform has already done the work to verify that this is legit? And in the absence of the verification process, then if an account's not verified, then I don't get it. You're bitching about something where the solution has already been thought of and has been put into place and has been in practice for years. If other people can't figure this out, like, I don't know what more you want a platform to do. Like, they've already addressed the problem. I don't get it. Anyway, moving on. Since World War II, many nations have passed laws to curb the incitement of racial and religious hatred. These laws started out as protections against the kind of anti-Semitic bigotry that gave rise to the Holocaust. We call them hate speech laws, but there's no agreed-upon definition of what hate speech actually is. In general, hate speech is speech that attacks and insults people on the basis of race, religion, ethnic origin, and sexual orientation. Okay, here's the thing about hate speech, and this is why, going back to the top of this episode, I made the point that all speech is hate speech. Hate speech, like pornography, has no legal definition. So, if you are trying to make a law against something, step one has to be to come up with an actual functioning legal definition of the thing that you want to ban. If you cannot pass step one, if you cannot get that functioning legal definition of the thing that you want to ban, that should be your clue that progressing to step two is a very bad idea. Like, if you want to ban something, if you want to ban hate speech, if you want to ban pornography, if you want to ban whatever it is you want to ban, you have to be able to define what that thing is. And absent any kind of legal definition, how in the world are you possibly supposed to go forward with creating a law to ban a thing? Like, that makes no damn sense. So, there's the problem right there. There is the nexus of the problem. You cannot ban something if you cannot define it. And hate speech cannot be defined because it's subjective. It's subjective to every single person on the planet. Something that I have no problem with, you might find wildly offensive. You might find it hateful. You might find it personally hateful towards you. But okay, that's not a legal standard. And even if I find something personally offensive, I am not so arrogant to think that my personal standards should be everybody's standards and that it should be codified into law, which is another problem I have whenever somebody wants to step up and make these kinds of arguments. It's like, well, okay, you do you. No. You don't, your personal opinions, your personal feelings do not get to be applied to everybody in the country. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And nobody should think that that's how this works. But everybody who makes these kind of arguments thinks that's how it works. It's like, well, because I personally find something offensive, it should be banned. Okay, find something personally offensive. The rest of us don't give a fuck. And I talk about this too when I talk about cancel culture. The idea that just because you personally don't like something, that it needs to go away. No, you need to get it out of your life, get it out of your face in whatever way you choose to, but you don't get to make that decision for everybody else. You don't have that right. Nobody should have that right. So that's why this bothers me so much. It's you can't ban something that you can't define, and if your definition is based on what you personally think, well, great. Then you conduct your life that way. You get rid of the things that you think are hate speech, but you don't get to come to me and say that I have to get rid of those things too, because I may like them. I may not even find them offensive. I may not think about them at all. So no, just no. Moving on. I think it's time to consider these statutes. The modern standard of dangerous speech comes from Brandenburg versus Ohio, and holds that speech that directly incites imminent lawless action or is likely to do so can be restricted. Domestic terrorists such as Dylan Roof and Omar Mateen and the El Paso shooter were consumers of hate speech. Speech doesn't pull the trigger, but does anyone seriously doubt that such hateful speech creates a climate where such acts are more likely? Okay. First off, bringing up Brandenburg versus Ohio and trying to make an argument that the imminent lawless action that addresses should somehow be expanded to cover certain kinds of speech other than what is imminent lawless action is really disingenuous. Like, and what Brandenburg versus Ohio deals with, and as far as what they mean by imminent lawless action, it would be like if I told you, hey, go shoot that guy, and then you go shoot that guy, then yeah, I can be held legally responsible because I told you to do it and you went and did it. And would you have done it if I didn't tell you to? Who knows, but I told you to. So that's it's meant for very concrete situations like that where it's a call to imminent lawless action. What it seems like Richard is trying to do here is to try to expand that to speech that isn't that direct and clear, but could possibly lead to violent actions. And for what it's worth, after the El Paso shooting, I did a whole episode where I read the El Paso shooter's manifesto verbatim. And I did that for a few reasons. First of which, I do think, and this is where I come down on this argument, I do think that there is value in knowing what the hell was going on in somebody's mind when they decided to do a horrific act. And there's a huge divide here where there are people that feel the way I do, and then there are people that feel the opposite, in that in doing that, you are giving that person more light and more heat than they deserve, and you're kind of giving them what they want. And I understand that side of the argument too, but I do think that there is value in knowing what the hell is going on in these people's heads. Second of all, and especially on the El Paso shooters manifesto, and I made this point in the episode, yeah, there was a lot in that manifesto that is almost verbatim what you hear on Fox News or what you hear out of certain right-wing commentators. And yeah, they deserve to be called out on that. Do they deserve to be held legally responsible? No. But do they deserve to be rightfully called out and make it known, and to see that the things that you are saying are being used to justify horrific acts? Abso-fucking-lutely. But that's two different things. Holding somebody legally responsible for what somebody else did, and holding somebody socially responsible for what somebody else did. It's two entirely different things, and it should stay that way. Like, I don't want to see Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham put in jail over what the El Paso shooter did. I want everyone to know that the things in that manifesto mirror what the hell they say. And that's, I'm not a huge fan of making things illegal in the first place. I think we need to make a hell of a lot more things legal. Like, I'm just not a huge fan of expanding the state, and expanding the state in this way of touching upon people's speech. It's just, no. We need to be going in the opposite direction. We don't need to be making more things illegal. We need to be making less things illegal. And I'm not, outside of imminent lawless action, I'm not super, and even that, I'm not super comfortable with holding somebody responsible for something that they did not personally do. And that seems to be the argument that he's making here by drawing a comparison between Brandenburg and these mass killers. So, moving on. Let the debate begin. Hate speech has a less violent but nearly as damaging impact in another way. It diminishes tolerance. It enables discrimination. Isn't that, by definition, speech that undermines the values that the First Amendment was designed to protect? Fairness, due process, equality before the law? Why shouldn't the states experiment with their own version of hate speech statutes to penalize speech that deliberately insults people based on religion, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation? Okay, again, I draw a distinction between the First Amendment and free speech. It's two different things. Yes, they overlap, but it's not the same thing. So, oh my God. Okay, first of all, just no. I don't care what your speech enables or doesn't enable. Be a jackass. Be a jackass in public. Be a jackass where we can all fucking see you. That's what I want. I don't want you being some kind of racist, misogynistic, xenophobic asshole in some weird corner where we can't see you. I want you to do it where we can all see you. Go ahead, do it where millions of people can see you for who you are. Be my guest. But this idea that somehow the things that make people uncomfortable or just don't make people feel very good or may actually hurt people's feelings or they find it personally offensive somehow undermines the values of the First Amendment. The First Amendment is there for speech that is inflammatory. It is there for speech that is potentially hurtful. It's not there to protect the speech that everybody likes. It's there to protect the speech that nobody likes. That's what it's there for. I mean, it's just such an insanely ass-backwards understanding of what the First Amendment and what the culture of free speech is meant to protect. It's not meant to protect the shit that everybody agrees on. We don't need that. Why would you need a constitutional amendment for that? Why would you need a culture for that? That's just inherent. It's to protect the people who say things that aren't mainstream, that maybe are fringe, things that maybe are hurtful. That's what it's there for. And the idea that somehow we need to do the hate speech thing to protect fairness and due process and equality before the law. Dude, we already have other constitutional amendments that handle that. We've got that handled. Again, you're trying to solve a problem that has already been solved and has been solved for, a little over 200 years. So again, what is it that you really want here? What is it that you're really aiming for? Because all of the things that you bring up as problems are problems that have already been solved. So what are you trying to solve here? Anyway, let's go on to the last paragraph. All speech is not equal, and where truth cannot drive out lies, we must add new guardrails. I'm all for protecting thought that we hate, but not speech that incites hate. It undermines the very values of a fair marketplace of ideas that the First Amendment is designed to protect. Okay, first off, all speech is equal. All speech is equal. Do not ever let me catch you trying to make an argument that some people's speech is more important than other people's speech. Don't you ever let me catch you make an argument like that. And as far as putting up guardrails, no. What guardrails? Who's going to make the guardrails? What are the guardrails going to be? Has anybody thought about that? What do you think this is going to look like in practice? Because I can guarantee you it is not going to be anything you like. It is not going to be what you think in your head is going to be some magical fucking utopia. It's going to suck. So you better think hard before you ever make an argument like that. And as far as protecting thought that you hate, but not speech that incites hate, what the fuck is the point of having thoughts if you can't articulate them? I mean, what the fuck kind of argument is that? That's the kind of argument that, I grew up hearing Cuban refugees who had to live under that kind of system where you could have thoughts in your head, but damn, don't ever let them come out of your mouth. That's not the kind of world I want to live in. What the fuck? No, I am not trying to live in a world where I can have thoughts in my head, but I can't let them come out of my mouth. That's absurd. That is totalitarianism on a scale that, if you really sat down and thought about it, would horrify you, because it is horrifying. And I've heard the stories from the people who lived under that. That's what bothered me the most. Hearing stories from Cuban refugees growing up who left out of Castro's Cuba. And when I say Castro's Cuba, I don't mean like Raul's Cuba that we have now. I mean Fidel's Cuba. The stories, I mean, even the poverty, even the lack of food, the shitty housing, the lack of water, all that sucks. The thing that terrified me, that just really got me, was the fact that so many of these people had to leave just to be able to express themselves and to speak their mind. Like that floored me growing up. Like that horrified me. Like I couldn't imagine living somewhere where I couldn't, you couldn't speak your mind. You couldn't voice your opinions on fear of death. Honestly, I mean, if you spoke out against Fidel in Fidel's Cuba, you got ghosted. You got gone. You got picked up in the middle of the night and your family never saw your ass again. So no, I have a pretty deep visceral reaction to that idea. Like, no. Anyway, that is the end of that piece. And like I said, this is a horrible piece. But we live in a country where, thankfully, people get to publish their horrifying garbage pieces in public without getting shot. And that's pretty cool. Even when they do suck, it's still cool that you got to publish that. And I'm assuming you might have got paid for that. I really don't know how the Washington Post works as far as that's concerned. But just the fact that you get to do this should completely disprove your theory that we need laws regarding speech. Because if there were laws regarding speech, I would be like, this is some hateful ass speech and it needs to get gone. And that's not right. Like, I shouldn't get to have that power. Nobody should. Like, I can't. It blows my mind when people who live in this country make arguments that speech needs to be regulated. Like, the whole fact that you can even say that in this country because you have the legal right to do it and you have the societal right to do it should give you some level of pause to stop and think, hey, maybe that take is incorrect. But no, here we are. And it's not solely from one side anymore. And that's what scares me. You're seeing people not only from the far left making this argument, also people from the far right making this argument that something must be done about the speech. And it's like, no, nothing needs to be done about the speech. You need to police your own damn life. Leave everybody else alone and stop it. Because first of all, it's transparent as hell, because anybody who makes that argument, if you ask them, well, what speech do you want to see gone? It's going to be whatever they personally find offensive, which, no, I don't care. I don't care what you find offensive. Deal with it. That's life. That's being a grown-up. You're going to be offended. Fucking learn to deal with it. Stop being a snowflake. Anyway, I think I've said enough about this piece. Like it scares me because, like I said, this is an idea that I'm starting to see more and more, and it's something it needs to be fought back against. We as libertarians need to fight back strenuously against these sorts of ideas before people start thinking it's a good idea, and before, God forbid, they start taking hold somewhere, because then we're all screwed. Every single one of us is going to end up screwed if these ideas get implemented. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and on my Patreon page, which I will put the link in the show notes. And if you do become a Patreon, you do get advanced access to my episodes. So, yeah, that's about it. As always, take care, and until next time.